A warm welcome back to the League of the Genuine, the only show on the planet where we discuss the important but often ignored subject of counterfeits. The purpose of this show is to awaken the consumer with information that should empower you to push back against the menace of counterfeits. As always, we have a special guest every Friday where we sit down with the guest to deepen our understanding of the subject of counterfeits. Join me in welcoming Mr. John Kakungulu Walugembe. You are welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fred, for having me here. It's a pleasure to join you on this famous show.
Thank you. I asked you actually why you had come, and I was joking that were you put on gunpoint to come? Does this connect with your
Not at all.
personal
I
interest?
think more people should be speaking about the issue of counterfeits, because after working hard for your money, you don't want to lose it through the actions of unscrupulous actors. So therefore, although we don't have as many voices speaking about the fight against counterfeits, I think more of us should be speaking more against counterfeits. And my role in the Federation puts me in a very important position, because some businesses have been victims, but have also been perpetrators of this vice.
You are a business economist. You are a private sector consultant.
True.
You work with many of the development partners, the
Yes.
World Bank,
Yes.
the EU,
Yes.
USAID,
Yes.
and you are consulting and supporting
Yes.
businesses.
Correct.
In your experience,
Yes.
consulting in the business sector, have you found that there is a counterfeit problem, and how does it present?
Well, the counterfeit problem is, I would say, there's limited awareness by many consumers. So they don't know what is an original product, what is the fake product. They may have concerns. Personally, I recently bought a particular brand of soap, and when I used it, I had a lot of concerns. I felt, no, this is not
What was the effect?
the effect
you?
on my... Well, I didn't have any noticeable effects, but the smell and so on was completely different. So I felt cheated, but obviously, at some point you say, okay, let bygones be bygones. So if you have a lot
So you
of
threw it away?
I threw it away. Of course, I bought a batch and used one and felt not it and threw away the rest. So that's lost money, So a lot of consumers are losing their hard-earned money this way, and they are putting their health, the health of their children, at risk because of these things. No wonder we see a lot of us now suffering from diseases that our forefathers didn't suffer from. See a lot of young people suffering from cancer and so on, because who knows, they are relying on some of these things. So all of us ought to be concerned about this problem. And as an actor in the small and medium enterprise space, I think it is my duty to speak up and say this is something we ought to fight. Not just from a personal perspective, but also from the country's kind of perspective. If we are to grow our local industries, we cannot build them on the back of counterfeiting.
But some people say China developed because of counterfeits. So why are we complaining?
No, you can't just copy and paste the Chinese model. We have to do things right. They were probably lucky because at that time the intellectual property laws were weak and so on. The world has changed. We are now in 2023. You can't just use the Chinese playbook and you think you succeed.
But besides, actually, China has a very strong anti-counterfeit program. They confiscate a lot of these products.
Correct.
And actually, they are quite ruthless. Some people get executed once. So I think the counterfeits is more of the exception than the rule.
Correct.
And in fact, as a result, China has become a world leader in the manufacture and production of a lot of the genuine brands that
Very
we have.
true. Yeah.
They
In the
are-
West.
They are the biggest manufacturers of computers,
Yes.
mobile phones,
Yes.
garments.
Yes.
So it is not true that everything they make is
No,
is
it's
fake.
it's
Actually,
not true.
they make a lot of genuine. Okay,
True.
but as a consultant,
Yes.
have you done any consultancy on counterfeits, seeing as you know that this is a big problem?
Unfortunately, I haven't, because as a consultant, I'm more of a mercenary. I'm an intellectual mercenary. I get paid for what the party wants to see
The
investigated.
client
The
who
client.
hires you,
Client who hires me. So I follow their interest, not my interest.
can't you, as a
So-
mercenary, suggest to your client that out there, when I went to the field,
Yes.
I found there is this and this area, especially if you have a client who is interested, for example, in socio-economic development issues.
Yes.
Aren't you allowed to say, why don't
No,
we have a
inc-
research grant in this area?
Increasingly, we are insisting, for instance, that a lot of businesses that are supported, I mean, if I have my hand in a particular program, I make sure there's a certain element of certification. Certification of systems and processes, but also certification of the end product. So that is something that I increasingly make sure is incorporated in most of these programs.
The reason I ask this
Yeah.
is because as executive director
Yes.
at the Federation of Small and Medium
Federation.
Scale Industries,
Yes.
I have seen that one of the objectives of this federation
Yes.
is to enable market
Access. Correct.
market access support
Yes.
to businesses.
Yes.
And yet you realize that counterfeits, fakes, substandard
Yes.
present a barrier to
Market
entry
entry.
into the market.
Correct.
So what is the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises doing to smoothen the passage into the market of these members of yours? Do you have an anti-counterfeit policy?
As an organization, we do have an anti-counterfeit policy, but we have not, I wouldn't say that we have been championing anti-counterfeit necessarily. We've been, of course, as a federation, we focus a lot on issues of market access, and as you mentioned, if SMEs, if Ugandan industrialists or businesses start exporting fake things, means our efforts in terms of market access are nullified. So it's in our interest to ensure that SMEs manufacture and export quality original products. At the same time, our SMEs have also been victims, because remember, some of our inputs are imported or sourced off the local market, and in fact some of these are fake, and that if you use fake inputs, chances are that you have a substandard final product. So a lot of businesses in the manufacturing sector have found themselves losing money this way. So as a federation, we've been championing product certification. We've also been championing process certification. Unfortunately, a lot of the level of awareness, as I mentioned, around issues of counterfeiting are still low. The other barrier, of course, is that the process of certification is still expensive for many of them. And the awareness, not just about counterfeiting, but generally around intellectual property issues, is very low. So we've been working with URSB, with the Uganda National Bureau of Standards and others to address these issues. But it's a big problem, and a lot more needs to be done.
Because
Yes.
according to your report that I saw online,
Yes.
you are saying that whereas the small scale entrepreneur and industry
Yes.
contributes 90% to the
Correct.
manufacturing sector, even
True.
more,
True.
the majority of them don't survive to celebrate their second or third
Correct.
anniversary.
Correct.
Why are these small businesses opening in the thousands and
Yes.
closing in the thousands every year?
Well, the number of constraints, some of the constraints are macro level constraints, issues around regulation. We also have micro level constraints, capacities within the business and the entrepreneur themselves. Many people start businesses that they're not competent in. Many copy and paste businesses. You see someone is doing something, and in fact this is also the problem of counterfeiting, because you try to copy somebody. So you see someone is making juice, you try to copy without adequate training, so you end up putting counterfeit product on the market because you want to make quick profits.
There's no mentorship, because you also do mentorship.
There's limited mentorship, and in fact this is a problem particularly for women-led businesses. So part of what we are pushing now is every intervention, particularly if it's targeting women, ought to have a mentorship element. You know, because you can't just like football, where you need a coach to support a talented player. Entrepreneurship needs to also benefit from this kind of knowledge of experienced actors. So we are trying to ensure that businesses are mentored, both by the federation and also by the entrepreneurs themselves. So we put in place networks and platforms to ensure that as you start or before you start, you're taken through the process, what you need, so that you are better prepared to start this business.
But is the mentorship working? If you consider that, I think right now or in the past month,
yes,
we've had another incident of Ugandan entrepreneurs or traders or manufacturers stuck at the border with South Sudan, or stuck in South Sudan because the products do not conform to standards, or they are suspected counterfeit. This has also happened with Kenya.
Yeah.
Eggs, milk,
Yeah.
whatever. Do you feel that as a country we are doing enough to ensure quality, or we're just allowing the counterfeits to thrive?
So I think there are two issues. One, the entity that's mandated with these quality issues, the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, cannot do this job alone. It has been advocating for more budget and so on, but they can't keep up with the pace of the economy in this particular area. So they need to find new ways of working with other actors, of delegating certain minor functions to other actors. So there's a bit of self-regulation. So that UNBS's role really is very macro and high level, but at the moment they're micromanaging the entire process, and it ends up becoming expensive, and it ends up being very, not being very practical. That's one thing I would say. But two, this particular problem of South Sudan and Kenya has another element of non-tariff barriers. Let me use maize as an example. Maize, South Sudan and Kenya have complained about aflatoxins. Now, part of the problem that we have here is we have a lot of poor harvest handling techniques.
Post-harvest handling.
Post-harvest handling, rather. So you harvest maize and then you kind of dry it on the floor and store
on the
it.
road, on the tarmac.
Sometimes on the tarmac, sometimes you store it in a damp room and so on. And this is why you find some of these problems. So it goes back to education. But for Sudan and Kenya, they use these sometimes as a technique to keep out Ugandan products. Now, I'm not saying Ugandan products
is it
have
made up? Is the
sometimes it's made up, because what happens is Kenya stopped Ugandan maize from accessing the market, and then I think a month or so down the road they had a drought, and then they came and said Uganda needs to reserve all its maize for the Kenyan market. So
and they were not asking questions.
Now aflatoxin had disappeared. So there's that as well. That happens more so in those value chains where Kenyan, because there are also nationalistic issues and geopolitical issues, because the Kenyan leaders are also politicians. So sometimes they under a lot of pressure, because if you look at Ugandan eggs, sometimes they flood the market in Kenya, and that puts a lot of pressure on politicians.
The local poultry farmers.
The same with milk. Uganda overproduces, and it puts a lot of pressure on local farmers. So there's that aspect as well. So there's there are areas where we are doing very badly, and sometimes some of these are being used as excuses, non-tariff barriers we call them, to keep out Ugandan products, because especially in the agricultural sector, in certain things we are starting to overproduce, which is a
But
good
talking about excuses, you opened your discussion here by demonstrating or talking about how bad the counterfeits are, and they are causing diseases like cancer. Now, aflatoxins are known to be have active carcinogens which cause cancer.
Correct.
So can we be talking of aflatoxins and then we call it an excuse, and then also we have cancer as an issue?
No,
and we diluting the
no, I'm not saying that it's not a danger, and I'm not saying that we are faultless. Yeah, I'm simply saying that in some instances this is used.
There's no fair play sometimes.
But that does not mean that we're also doing the right thing. In many instances, we're also not doing the right thing. And some people now have invested in machinery to test, because the other issue is that we didn't have a way of determining these aflatoxin levels and stuff, and drying and all that. And some people have invested in those facilities, which is a good
to clean up.
But also, we need to educate more of our, because the challenge, I think, with Uganda is that we place a lot of emphasis on production, and we don't focus on we don't focus on the entire value chain, because just planting a lot of maize or tomatoes is just half of the problem. You know, if you're going to adulterate the quality and then you can't take them to market, then you have a problem, both with the farmers but also with the economy, because there's a lot of wastage. So I think we need to focus more on not just production,
integrity
across the value chain. Correct.
Let's take a break. We're back with the second segment. This is the League of the Genuine Conversations with your host, Fred Mwema. We are in studio here with our guest, Mr. John Kakungulu Warugembe, a private sector consultant. Whereas you say that we have a problem with counterfeits and it's affecting exports and so on, I think we need to create a demand for more knowledge to understand this problem of counterfeits. What are some of the ways you think we can improve our stock of knowledge? How do we get more consultancies going in? How do we get more consumer education? How do we?
So I think, first of all, the issue of counterfeiting is a market problem. There's distortion in the market, because if people are demanding, sometimes through ignorance, demanding for counterfeit products, then it means that is going to spur supply. And that's why we have to intervene, both on the supply, yes, through enforcement and all that, but also on the demand side, through awareness, explaining to people clearly what is an original product, explaining to them the cost. You may think you're saving 100 shillings on a product, but you're putting your health on the line. You're going to spend much more trying to remedy this problem. Yes.
But we have a problem, John, of poverty. A lot of people in Africa say that poverty is driving us into buying counterfeits. Is poverty an excuse, a reason for you to buy a poisonous food and kill your children, or poisonous syrup?
No.
Can you articulate that poverty, the economics of
poverty? Because you see, the issue is that the challenge with Africa is that sometimes the richer we get, the more we expose ourselves to these kinds of things, because you want to eat processed foods, you want to eat this, you want to eat that. A lot of our natural foods are less prone. Of course, we are having fake seedlings and fake things, but a lot of our organic food is less prone to being adulterated. So we can't say that as a poor person, you have no choice except to rely on these kinds of counterfeit products. Because at the end of the day, if we do that, we are going to put a strain on the healthcare system. This is what you're having in the West now, because you find that a lot of poor people are having to eat this kind of junk food and stuff like that, and it's stressing the healthcare system. So I would not agree with the assertion that just because you're
poverty
poor,
par excellence is a
yes,
reason to consume.
No. I think you can be poor and spend your money well to access quality products that fit within your income. You just need to have the proper education to know that if I'm buying, you know. Of course, there's also the issue around competition and aspiration. I want to be like X. My neighbor is taking this kind of thing, which you can't afford, so you're looking for that brand, but because you can't afford to pay for the origin, you look for something that looks like.
Because one of the things that confuses me,
Yes,
when you were born in
Yes.
1981,
yes,
Uganda was poorer than it is now.
correct.
Our per capita, I think
Yes.
those days, I don't know, was $200 or something.
Mhm.
We're now maybe going to 600. So we are richer
Than
than in 1981. But in
Correct.
1981, we didn't have counterfeits. In 2023, bigger economy, more modernized, more income, but we are consuming
Well, with
counterfeits.
globalization exposes countries like ours to certain risks. Now, one of the risks that countries like ours face is dumping. And in fact, some of these counterfeits are made on order by our own business people. See, they go to these countries, and because they want to maximize profits,
They buy inferior.
they buy inferior, or they instruct the manufacturers, no, please make for me something like this, but at half the cost.
Or they even buy expired.
Or they-
Did you know that many of your members who are
Yes.
in trading,
Yes,
they go and buy
yes,
a product which is either expired or about to expire, and so they'll buy it at a knockoff. If the
Yes.
product is $10,
yes,
because its shelf life
yes. It's
has come to an end,
come to an end, yes,
they'll get it at $1.
yes.
Then they come here and change the expiry date.
Yes.
A lot of the products in our supermarkets, they have
Expiry
tampered-
dates have been-
they have tampered with the expiry date.
Yeah,
And if you are able to check,
yes,
some of them mislead by writing maybe the price, or they put a sticker of the price there and so on. And yet, I heard you speaking about product certification.
yes,
But product certification also can be faked, can also be counterfeited. You can get the quality mark counterfeited, you
Correct.
can get a QR code counterfeited, and so on.
correct.
How do you think we should deal with this?
No, we should utilize new tools like ICT and so on. You see, because if, for instance, right now, I know that UNBS lists all the companies that have certified their products, or the products that are certified by. So in this range, these are certified products and so on. So if this were digitized, so that if I go, I probably have a QR code that I can confirm whether this is a certified product, it becomes much easier. And I think that's where entities like UNBS have to help us to help them, because without that it becomes difficult. Because if I see a Q mark, and so I can't know that this is the original Q mark or this is the fake Q mark. See, so people have moved ahead. In addition to faking the product itself, they even fake the mark.
Quality markets.
Yes.
But also we consumers, don't you think we are to blame in a way? Because you go to a supermarket
Yes.
to buy a product,
Yes,
it has a barcode,
yes,
but you have a phone,
Yes.
a smartphone,
you can check.
you don't check even, you just buy. You are instead using the phone for
other things.
entertainment,
For chatting.
Who won between Cindy and,
And
Shiba,
Shiba, yes.
and all these things.
Yes.
And so, don't you think we are not effectively using technology?
But a lot of consumers don't know how to effectively use technology. That is the reality. The Federation has been doing work around digital literacy, and we actually found that the levels of digital literacy are just amazing. You know, among people you would think know better. They have these smartphones and they just use them for calling, TikTok and WhatsApp. So we need to educate.
But how can you say our digital literacy is low when we are 40 million people,
yes,
and we have more than 30 million active cellular phones?
No, having
what
a
are
cellular
we doing
phone,
with the phones?
having a cellular phone, and that's my point. Someone will have a cellular phone and only use 5% of its functionalities. TikTok spends 90% of the time on TikTok. Yet they can use this phone for so many other things. And I think this is where the education has to come. To tell consumers you can use your phone to verify whether the product is genuine or not.
But if we are blaming the consumer,
but also the authorities, I think need to do a better job. The current model of centralizing oversight over this area will not work. UNBS can keep asking for more budget, but at the end of the day they have to delegate some of these assignments to different groups. So for instance, I would say before you pick a mark from UNBS, first go to the Juice Manufacturers Association. So the Juice Manufacturers Association is your guarantor. They come and check your facility and so on and so forth. So that before UNBS comes running after you, the association will say, no, we came and checked and you're engaging in fake things. Because these other guys are also doing juice. By you counterfeiting, you're also affecting their bottom line. So they have an interest. But if UNBS takes on the entire responsibility, it's too much. It's not possible.
But an argument can be made. An argument can be made.
Yes.
That the brands also are not doing enough to sensitize the consumers about the quality marks on the product packaging.
That's true. That's true.
Because what the brand is doing is just advertising the soap and
Correct.
saying it kills bacteria.
Correct.
It is good for your child. They are not saying, but when you are buying this soap, be sure to check the authenticity of the product by scanning the QR code. Don't you think brands need to?
No, brands. I think brands. My thinking is that brands want to emphasize the positive. They think that by alerting consumers or by trying to, they may appear to be vulnerable, to be under attack by.
No, but they're already under attack. Their products are being faked.
True, but I think in their view, and I'm just thinking on their, I'm just making assumptions here. In the heads of their brand managers or advertisers or whatever, they think, you know what, let's try to solve this problem below the radar. Unfortunately, they can't. And that's why I agree with you that they need to come out and acknowledge the problem and work jointly with the consumer and tell the consumer, please help us find X and Y. Like government, when it's fighting terrorism, it will say the terrorist looks like this and this and this and this and this. Why? Because they know that citizens may help them to find the culprit much faster than if they did it
But
themselves.
when brands are doing an operation to get counterfeits, it's done very quietly. People are not even informed
And that's
how
the
the
point.
counterfeit looks like. So it's possible that as the brand is doing a cleanup, a market sweep
Yes,
to take out the fake, people are actually actively buying that very fake,
very true,
and they are not aware.
very true. And that's the problem.
So that's the problem. But you are a widely traveled man. You have seen many product recalls.
Yes.
This Samsung is fake, this car has issues and so on.
Toyota and so
Have you ever seen a product recall in Africa?
No, because of the challenge with African economy is that when you open up, when you liberalize your economy and make it a free market economy, you must have government must concentrate on regulation, good and robust regulation. That's why you see the EU fining Google, fining Facebook for anti-competitive behavior and things like that, because the government now becomes the guarantor on behalf of the consumer to ensure that they don't take any advantage of. Unfortunately, in Africa, we find that our regulation regime is very weak. Yes, we have the laws, but the enforcement is almost non-existent. Sometimes some of these brands are larger than life because they are paying taxes and so on and so forth. African governments feel intimidated. They cannot bring them to book, which is extremely unfortunately. So for me, that is a regulation problem.
But okay, I know Uganda, we don't have consumer protection law yet.
Yes.
We don't have anti-competition law.
Correct.
But there is product liability that comes with manufacturing a product, and
Yes.
you as the manufacturer being responsible
True.
for the safety
Yes.
of the consumers of this product.
Mm.
If I am Samsung
Yes.
and I have done a recall of S7 because it's defective
In the EU.
in the EU and in Brazil and in India,
And I let it circulate in
and
Africa.
Mr. Kakunguru is my customer,
Yes.
don't I have a responsibility to Mr. Kakunguru here in Uganda to recall this product? Because the Europeans are being compensated. If you had an S7, return it, we give you another one.
True.
Why are you ignoring Mr.
Because the EU Commission will find them if they don't
Kakunguru? They
do that.
enforce.
They enforce. In Africa, the governments will do nothing. So they feel, you know what?
Let's leave it.
Let's leave it. Because there's no consequence for action.
But it's a double-edged sword, because if you are selling a product
Yes.
and it has functionality issues, it has performance issues,
Yes.
it means that the consumer experience with your brand will suffer.
True.
And yet you're the same company spending a lot of money advertising on TV.
True.
You want more Africans to buy the product.
Very true.
But the phone is blowing people's ears. And this should not concern you. Don't you think we should have more responsibility?
I think so. What's happening, and I think the dynamics are changing, because increasingly you have a middle class in Africa that is concerned about these things. Previously, people felt anything can go in Africa, but that is changing, and brands have to change that kind of mindset. And if you say that Chinese are moving very strongly against anti-counterfeit, because they realize that reputation is everything, you see. So if Africans, and this is what people used to say some time back about Japan and so on and so forth, and then, you know, Japan made sure that it's known for quality products and stuff. So brands have to ensure that they are able to maintain customer loyalty in Africa. They can't just say, oh, you know, whatever we take there will be bought. No, that won't be the case going forward. I think brands have to find, especially brands from the West and also from the East, they have to find ways of engaging with a vigilant African consumer who is educated, who knows their rights, who will take them to court if they feel that their rights are being infringed upon.
Let's take a break. We're back with the third and last segment of the League of the Genuine Conversations. We are here to deepen your understanding about counterfeits. We have a guest, Mr. John Kakunguru Walugembe, business economist. Counterfeits have grown over the past decade.
True.
By 1,000%, even more. I mean, we are having figures which before COVID were maybe 300 billion or so, but the figures are almost getting to 1 trillion. So it's a big economic problem.
That's true.
But what we see is that counterfeits are not recognized as an economic factor in the production cycle. You economists are still telling us that the factors of production are land, capital, entrepreneurship. What is the other one? You're not mentioning counterfeits. Don't you think it is time that the economists put counterfeits in its rightful place?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that more than even the theoretical part of it, I think the applied economists, you know, the one who come up with budgets, the one who spend, need to appreciate the impact that counterfeits have on the growth trajectory of a country. Now, I think part of the challenge is that we don't have a lot of research that is able to quantify and tell them in the construction sector, for instance, this is the challenge. And then you see a lot of focus, for instance, on corruption
and terrorism
and these kinds of things. And then a very important factor, like counterfeiting, is ignored. So I think what stakeholders like you and us need to do is to do research. Ask government, please fund research to understand the impact in the agricultural sector, for instance. Because if you look at the agricultural sector and the investments that government is putting in, and the fact that its contribution to GDP is shrinking, maybe counterfeiting has a lot to do with it, because farmers cannot trust the authenticity of the seeds anymore, the fertilizer, the what. So you no longer have an agricultural sector if you don't have authentic seeds, authentic fertilizer, authentic this, authentic that. So these are things that we need to take seriously. If you're talking about manufacturing, you cannot grow your manufacturing sector if you have fake inputs, fake raw materials, fake packaging material.
I think we can stick a bit with agriculture,
Yes.
Which is closest to the land.
Yes.
There's some research. There's some research there. Upwards of 30-40% of our agrochemicals on the market are fake. Upwards of 30-40% of the seeds are fake.
Yes.
We have a very low uptake of fertilizers in Uganda, but still we have fake fertilizers.
Yes.
The dairy industry is suffering because of fake antibiotics given to the cows, fake acaricides that are not killing the ticks. Some cows are going blind. This information is there. And what is more is that our food security, food production is affected, and therefore we are not sure of we're not going to be sure of the next meal.
Correct.
Isn't that sufficient for an economic planner of this country to say this is a factor that can affect all the economic indices that I would like to use to factor into the growth and development plan of a country? Don't you think we are just being negligent as a people? Because negligence is a big driver of counterfeiting.
I would imagine so. I completely agree with you on that, because especially if you talk about the issue of fake seeds and fake fertilizer and other agro inputs, this has been talked about for some time. Unfortunately, there is no concrete action that has been taken, and if we continue on this trajectory, we shall affect our ability to produce. And if this is the backbone of our economy, or this is an area where we are competitive as a country, then that would affect the other sectors of the economy. It would affect industry, because a lot of our industry is agro-industry. It relies on agricultural value addition, rather adding value to agricultural products. A lot of our services, auxiliary services, benefit from supporting the agricultural sector. So I think there's certain negligence, but also we citizens are not very vocal, because politicians sometimes act when there's a lot of pressure. So we are probably not putting as much pressure as we should, and I think we ought to do that.
But don't you think that since all of us are consumers,
Yes.
the politician is a consumer, the president is a consumer, the RDC is a consumer, you are a consumer, everyone should raise their voice. There is not a particular section of the consumers that should raise their voice, because even the politicians will buy the fake tire, which will burst and they lose a loved one or whatever. They will also take a fake anti-malarial, which could be on the market. They could take a fake cosmetic. So don't you think we need an awakening of everyone? We need to remind everyone that counterfeits no office, no status.
We need to awaken everyone, but the policymakers, the people who split the money that we entrust to them, have a special responsibility, because we've asked them to enforce on our behalf, because we cannot start enforcing individually. So we've asked government, please take care of these things on our behalf, and we think that they ought to do that job with urgency, because it will affect, you see, it's also a reputation issue. If South Sudan starts stopping your maize over aflatoxins, then you're in a very bad place. So if we are talking about exploiting the East African common market, if we're talking about taking advantage of the African continental free trade area and all these things, we can't do that if we cannot assure those markets of the integrity of the things we are taking there.
What, in your view, is a bigger problem? Absence of law or poor enforcement of the law?
It's poor enforcement. I think in this country it has always been poor enforcement. The laws are there, they are written. Once they are written, that's it. They are not enforced. See? So that laissez-faire attitude towards law enforcement is affecting our competitiveness as a country, because it all goes back to competitiveness. If I'm an investor and I'm bringing, I don't know, 200 million US dollars or whatever, and I'm likely to encounter some of these issues, then if I'm likely to get workers whose qualifications are fake. If I'm going to invest in land and then they tell me, oh, sorry, it's a fake title and so on, there's a squatter, there's this and so on. If I'm investing in agriculture and then I buy seeds and they are fake, then it doesn't really make sense to invest. So it's going to affect our competitiveness as a country, and we need to wake up to its negative impacts on our growth.
But John, don't you think that even we, whereas we may want to blame law enforcement and government institutions and everyone, but don't you think as well that we, the individuals, the citizens, are to blame, because we are the ones who take the decision at the point of purchase?
True.
You don't need the consent of the Minister of Trade or of Justice to buy something for your son or your daughter.
No.
And we are very negligent. We go to the supermarkets, for example, to buy things. We don't bother to check expiry date. We don't care to check the mark. We just buy. And we are again using the affordability angle. To say, no, buy me cheap. So, don't you think that enforcement is important even at a personal level? Self-enforcement, self-regulation.
Yes, so that's why I mentioned that we need to intervene at the supply side. That's where enforcement comes in with government. And on the demand side. On the demand side is around awareness. A lot of consumers just don't know. That is the reality. They just don't know how to distinguish. Even when we talk about the Q mark, very few people know. Can I even identify the Q mark? See? Consumers, from the consumer perspective. And I think that's where a lot of work needs to go, for starters. Because if there's no demand, there will be no supply. So if we tackle this starting from demand, how do we ensure that consumers do not purchase fake things? If they don't purchase fake things, no one will invest. The reason people hide and invest in making this, because someone's willing to buy. Okay? So awareness, making the consumer aware about what's genuine and what's not genuine, is something that ought to be done.
Some people
primarily by the manufacturer, because you are the biggest loser if people start buying fake things that are free riding on your brand.
Some people have argued that you can put the information there to the people, but they will not consume it. That they are always weighed down by a counterfeit subculture. We are just swimming in counterfeits, in our behavior, we are cheating exams, we are stealing everything. That basically there is a melee around. And that therefore, what we need is a behavior change. A behavior change, which for us, we have said under Dankani, that can the people know the concealed danger, for example? We think that if Kakungulu knows that this is harmful, it will hurt his liver, or it has a long-term effect, they will not buy it.
That's
Behavior change, rather than just giving information.
True.
give information so as to change the
Behavior.
the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of people.
I completely agree with you that we need, I mean, in this country we talk a lot about corruption and we point the fingers at the politicians. But what we are talking about, counterfeiting and so on, could also be looked at as another form
This
of
corruption.
corruption. Now, the challenge is that we look at it as a broad term that we're not able to break it down and say, you're counterfeiting or you buying a counterfeit product, you're actually supporting corruption. Okay? So we need to break down some of these concepts. We need to expose the danger. We need to make sure that the information we provide is actionable, is understandable, is not complex. Part of the challenges that we see is that a lot of the elite communicate with elitist terms, you know, that
And with the elites are consuming a lot of fakes. A lot.
unfortunately,
A lot, yes.
unfortunately. So how do we ensure that we communicate in a way that is clearly understandable and that is actionable? And, you know, and that's where the different constituencies come in. Churches, business associations, whatever. Because if different people are speaking about the same thing, people are likely to say, well, it's an issue. You know? But if it's just SCN speaking about it, will say, well, maybe, you know, they have their interests and so on and so forth. But if different constituencies are speaking about the same thing, then I'm sure people will listen and will act.
As we close, I know in your consultancy,
Yes.
you work with women groups supporting women and so on.
Yes.
But some people think that because of the influential role women play
Yes.
in a home,
Yes.
they are the ones who do the shopping and
Yes.
all this, that they knowingly or unknowingly bring counterfeits in our homes.
Yes.
So, do you think our anti-counterfeit energy
Yes.
should be built around women?
I would think so, because in most cases they are the ones who do the shopping, or they are the ones who make decisions what to buy,
They bargain
where
a
to
lot.
buy. Well, I wouldn't say so, but I
the
would
women
say that
bargain more than the
it tends
men.
to be their responsibility
Yes.
really to make most of these purchases. And they tend to be very particular. I need this, I need that. So I think educating them more to distinguish between fakes from the original would be a good strategy, because targeting everyone as a starting point may be ineffective. But if you isolate a group and say, let's communicate in a way that they understand, let's demonstrate, let's say we are talking about diapers, let's now say we are focusing on this, let's say we are focusing on that, I think that may end up being more effective.
End up being more effective.
Yeah.
Mr. Kakungulu, as we close, your message to the audience?
My
on
message to the
counterfeits?
audience is that the challenge of counterfeiting is much bigger than many of us realize, and if we don't move against it, we'll individually pay. Therefore, it's our duty to work together to ensure that this message goes out. And for the businesses, the brands, the manufacturers, it's your duty. It's not just about your advertising. You may find that your advertising revenue is simply driving sales for the counterfeiters. So you have a duty to educate the consumer about your product and its attributes, so that they are able to make that decision when buying.
Thank you so much. That has been Mr. John Kakungulu Walugembe, a private sector consultant. He's also associated with the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. These are the people in the engine room of the economy. We have been talking about counterfeits in the business sector and consultancy world, where he works. We thank you for making a date with us every Friday evening. We are here to give you more information about counterfeits so that you and your family can be kept safe. We believe that an informed consumer is an empowered consumer. If you're new here, this is the only show on the planet where we discuss the important but often ignored subject of counterfeits. If you like what we are doing, please do subscribe, do share, and remember to put the thumbs up for us and the notification for the new program as and when it comes. We'd like to sign off. Don't be fake, buy and sell genuine.